Is the Great Wall board game worth your hard-earned gaming dollars? We'll come on back after the break for a full review of this 1 to 5 player cooperative and competitive area control, worker placement, and a little bit of extra spice kind of board game. Hey everybody, welcome to the show Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to the tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is part of a video series looking at the game The Great Wall. Now, The Great Wall is a 1 to 5 player game, and in this video I'm going to give you my final thoughts on the game itself. Now, if you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll do my best to get to them as quickly as I can. Also, feel free to email me at off-the-shelf board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll do my best to answer emails as quickly as I can. If you enjoy the content, if you enjoy the videos I put out there, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Just tossing $1 in the tip jar over on Patreon is a great way to say thanks. No gimmicks, no games, no Kickstarters. This channel is 100% sponsor free. Just tossing $1 in the tip jar is a great way to say thanks. Let me know that you appreciate the content I put out there. Don't forget to like and don't forget to subscribe, because your likes and subscriptions definitely do matter to the YouTube algorithms. Let's go in and get things started with this full review of this game. The Great Wall is an asymmetric, area control, economic worker placement, and strategy game that can be played cooperatively or competitively, but don't kid yourself. Even as a competitive game, there is some forced cooperation here, as players must defend the Great Wall from the invading hordes themselves. It does play for 1 to 5 players if you get the expansion, and of course this expansion was a Kickstarter exclusive. I'm assuming that's going to be available in the future, because playing up to 5 players is definitely a very great way to enjoy this game. Do understand though that if you want to play this game as just with the base box, it's only going to play up to 4 players, and the average game will run you about 2 to 3 hours. The game is designed by, I'll try to pronounce these names, hopefully I won't butcher them too badly, but Kamil Ciesla, Robert Plazowicz, and Tukas Lordowsik. And I know I probably butchered those, but at least I can probably say the artist's name, which is Piotr Gajcek. The question here is, can you stop the invading hordes while bringing honor to your clan and shaming your opponents in an effort to win the Emperor's favor? That is the Great Wall. Now, at its heart, the Great Wall board game, you could pretty much say it's an area control game. It's also a resource management game. It's also a little bit of a war game, because you're going out there and doing things. It's also kind of a set collection game. It's also a lot of things. It is basically taking the whole kitchen sink, throwing everything inside there, shaking it up to make a great milkshake. But in this case, it actually works out. You know, sometimes when you take a whole bunch of mechanics and throw them in there, we like to refer to them as either victory point soup or basically just a whole bunch of pretty bad soup. Well, in this case, this is one of those instances where everything seems to work out. It meshes very well, and it does help that there's a really good theme behind the game. Now, of course, it's very easy to say that, hey, the theme is painted on. And sure, most worker placement games, the theme is painted on, because the average idea of your typical worker placement game, let's take games such as Lords of Waterdeep, where your basic objective, and I like to use the example of Lords of Waterdeep because that's another worker placement game that's trying to be extremely thematic. In Lords of Waterdeep, you have your workers and your resources, except your workers are your agents, and your resources are your fighters, your clerics, your wizards, your priests. They're going out there and using their abilities, resources, to go ahead and get you things that you can use to get more things. Use those more things to go ahead and accomplish tasks. You can use those tasks to score victory points. The Great Wall, thematically, well, I shouldn't say thematic, I should say mechanically, is very, very similar in that aspect. In the Great Wall board game, you're going to be moving around the game using your clerks to go to various different locations. Once the clerks are at the various different locations, based on certain rules and basically on things that are going to happen, you're going to get resources. These resources could be things such as gold. These resources could be things such as stone. These resources could be things such as chi, and finally these resources could be things such as wood. They're basically the idea, we've seen this before. You're getting resources, these resources are used for different things to go ahead and get more things. Those more things are going to help you get victory points. What this game has done though is adding in some extra really cool mechanics. And they're very thematic, and it really works for the theme of the game here, because in this game, you're basically defending China from the Mongol hordes. You're doing this by building up the Great Wall, and the Great Wall is going to help you stop these hordes that are going to continue to invade every single round. They're going to keep coming out there, attacking the wall until they either break through the wall, causing shame for all of our players, or players manage to do a whole bunch of things to send out their warriors, their cavalry, send out their archers, send out their spearmen to go ahead and take these Mongol hordes, destroy them, and score victory points for taking them out of the game. The cool thing about this game is that it has so many different ways to score victory points without feeling like it's one of those games that just feels like it's a victory point suit, where it feels like it doesn't matter what I do, I'm going to gain victory points. It's not the case here. In this game, you're going to score victory points different ways by playing smart, not by playing stupid. It's very easy to play this game and kind of flail around a little bit and do pretty terrible at it. It's also easy to play this game just by looking at the mechanics and throwing things out there and kind of do okay, because it's gives you this interesting mechanic of where you're trying to get these resources, and it's in a way tells you, incentivizes you different ways to go out there and score those victory points. For example, if you're playing the game and you see that there's lots of hordes coming out there, you probably want to start building up your armies to go out there and get victory points. It'll give you victory points. Or if you're having other players who are doing different things, you can kind of compensate and try to look at what they're doing to go ahead and get victory points in the game also in that way. So it kind of works together really well in that aspect, and it's a really good design. What the game does on top of that, though, which adds some unique mechanics that you don't see in a lot of worker placement games, is the first main mechanic is going to be the mechanic of the command cards. Now, these command cards add some unique things to the game, and in the fact that this is going to control how you're going to take actions. Now, in your average worker placement game, the way an average worker placement game is going to work is you're going to have your workers, and you're simply going to take your workers out there. Like I said earlier, you're going to send them to different locations. Your workers are going to give you those resources, and life is going to be good. Well, it doesn't actually work out that way, because in this game, you're going to have your command cards. You're going to play out command cards, and then all the players get to reveal these command cards, revealing exactly what they're going to do. So now we have a worker placement game that has a little bit of what I like to describe as verbal judo, because you're going to use your words to kind of influence the other players to take actions that'll work better for you. And you can do this some way by doing things such as, you know, everybody, if we don't take out all these hordes are going to take us all out, and then every single one of us is going to gain shame. And with all these shame tokens, we're all going to lose a lot of victory points. If we all lose victory points, nobody's going to do really good at this game. So I'm kind of using those mind games and trying to influence the other players. And I'm hoping that my mind games work, because I'm going to play the command card that's going to help me do the best things. So now you kind of have this additional mechanic on top of that. Not only that, like I said, this game does offer multiple different ways to get victory points. I can gain victory points by going out there and building the Great Wall. I can go out there and gain victory points by going out there and attacking the Mongol hordes. I can go out there and get victory points by actually just looking at the end game victory point conditions, and these end game victory point conditions are going to change every time you play the game. So this game does have a lot of variety, a lot of extra different things, and it takes the basic idea of a worker placement game and kind of ramps up quite a bit by adding some extra things that you don't see in your average worker placement game. And like I said a couple times now, for some strange reason, it really does work. Now, I know I keep repeating myself by saying it just works, but why do I keep saying that? Well, I'm saying that because the worker placement segment of our hobby is basically a big glut. There are so many worker placement games out there, and not to be perfectly blunt, there are a lot of very typical, very average, very mediocre, and dare I say, very forgettable worker placement games out there in the market. Sure, we have a lot of really good ones. I can list probably a half dozen really good ones in 2 seconds right now, and all of you will say, yo, those are really good worker placement games. I can say Feast for Odin. I can say Caverna. I can say Lords of Waterdeep. Talking about different worker placement games that have lots of different skill requirements to play in those games. But it is a market that doesn't have tons and tons of really great worker placement games. Worker placement games is kind of sitting in a niche where there's like tons of mediocrity and a few really good ones, really great ones that are hard to forget, but there's a lot of mediocrity in there. And it's nice to see additional games coming out there, worker placement games that are not just copying what's done before. It's so easy to copy what's done before and to say, hey, look, I just painted on theme number B, theme number C, theme number D, and we're basically playing the same game we played before. Instead of with Dungeons & Dragons, now we got archers and nobles and all those different things. That's not what we have here. We have extra mechanics which add to the brew to create something that's much, much greater than the sum of its parts. Now, the great thing about this game is ignoring the rulebook. I'll talk about the rulebook in just a couple moments here, because wow, when we talk about rulebooks, oh my gosh, this one needs some TLC, some first aid, and probably some CPR and some parts. But when we talk about games that have lots of luck versus skill, this is definitely a game that's going to reward lots and lots of skill. This game's going to reward lots and lots of skill for many different reasons. One of the first reasons why it's going to reward skill is this is a very asymmetric game. Every time you play this game, you're going to pick your general from 2 different generals that are going to be dealt out to you. But there are a lot of generals that come in this game. It is very, very possible that you can probably play this game probably about 30 times, depending on your player count, and not see the same combination of generals actually, you won't see the same combination of generals. I can guarantee you. There's so many of them out there. Plus, on top of the generals, you're also going to get your assistants. And these assistants are going to come out there and they're going to add extra more powers to you. And the cool thing about these assistants is you get more and more of the assistants. Of course, if you have the gold to pay for it, that's kind of the big caveat there. But as long as you have the gold to pay for it, these assistants will either come out there and give you more powers, or they're going to increase the power of your general by depending on how you add these onto your general. So you're looking at a game that's extremely asymmetric, and asymmetric games are games that definitely reward skill versus luck. Because to play a good asymmetric game and to play it well, you need to understand the mechanics, you need to understand how the parts work all together, you need to understand when you need to rely on your strengths and when you need to focus on getting rid of your weaknesses, how to combine all those and work with a board state that's constantly evolving. Those are all hallmarks of games that require lots of skill versus very luck. Now there is a little bit of luck involved in the game, but it's really not really luck that is anything that's going to be like dice luck or anything that's going to be really luck that's going to drive you crazy. Some luck might come in on how these hordes come out. Now I'm not going to lie, sometimes these horde cards are going to come out and you're going to say, wow, we just got really hosed, because some of these horde cards can be pretty challenging. I remember one time I played this game where we looked like we were doing fantastic. We had a section of the wall built up. We're like, oh, we got this, we got this, we got this. Then two leaders came out, followed up by spies. And I was like, oh, we so don't got this. And they went through and broke down our wall so badly because we weren't ready for that on that turn. So it's a little bit of luck, but again, there's kind of this competitive, cooperative game that's going on when you play this game every time. And again, that also is a skill when you play this game because it's a little bit slightly cooperative. You can't ignore the board state and ignore all the other players. You kind of have to work cooperatively to take out these hordes. If everybody ignores these hordes and tries to go after everything else to get their victory points, everybody's going to get those shame tokens, and nobody's really going to have a great time in the game. Well, you have a good time, but score-wise, you're not going to have a high score. You'll be lucky to break maybe 75 victory points. When I play this game, getting 150 to 200 or plus victory points is pretty darn common. So you see how learning to work with the state of the game requires skill, it requires experience, and this is going to be a game that is going to constantly grow with you. This isn't a game that you can play once, twice, 3 times and say, hey guys, I pretty much figured out everything that there is to go with this game. There's not much new to be discovered. No, there's tons of discovery left in this game with the way the generals work together, with the way the tactics work together, with the way the game is going to organically evolve every single time you play with the hordes, with the way everything's going out, and don't forget that verbal judo, the way it's going to interact between you and the other players, influencing each other, because these command cards are one heck of a really cool mechanic. You can't just do what you want to do every single turn. You're going to do with what your card plays, but understand every time you play a card, the cool thing is every one of these cards is great for you, but it helps everybody else around the table. So this is a game where you're constantly trying to manipulate the mindset of the other players to make sure that every card works great for you and only helps the other players as minimally as possible. Now, I honestly have to give kudos to Awaken Realms here. I'm not going to lie, when I originally saw this game come to Kickstarter, I didn't have a lot of high hopes. I knew Awaken Realms was pretty much known for making a lot of high miniature games where the miniatures was pretty much the big focus and gameplay was, well, usually decent, but it wasn't generally the great thing that was going to be a big influencer for the game. So that's one of 2 reasons why you see I actually went for the meeple version of the game. It was less expensive, and to be honest, when it comes to board games, I actually prefer meeples over plastic miniatures. For me, it's an aesthetic thing. I really, really greatly enjoy meeples more than playing games with plastic miniatures. So I'm not gonna lie, when I went into things, I did not have a lot of high hopes, but I was really pleasantly surprised to see lots of really great things with this game. One of the great things about this game is there are so darn many great ways to get victory points in this game. You can get victory points from building the wall. You get victory points from going out there and taking all these hordes. You can get victory points by using your tactic cards. You get victory points by using the abilities of your generals that can give you victory points. You get victory points by going out there and raising up your overseers. You get victory points in so darn many ways, and it's a great thing is you don't have to actually focus when you play this game. When you're playing this game, since there's so many different ways to get victory points, you can kind of say, I'm going for a pure military strategy. I'm going for a pure strategy of getting as many resources as I can to build up the wall, because there's some ways to get compounding victory points just from building the walls. And I actually talk about in the playthrough video about a combination that actually works really well for doing that. You can also get victory points by just basically looking at the end game victory conditions, or you work through all these things and kind of make it work all together. Get your victory points, and it's a nice, wonderful blend. It doesn't feel stale when you play the game, because every time you play the game, you're going to look at your general, look at your starting advisors and go, I see this is a starting board state. I see my opponents across the table, what their generals can and can't do. I think I know how I'm going to play the game this time. At least my starting strategy, which I know is going to evolve as the game goes across. Adding on to this fact, on top of that though, is the fact that I haven't really talked about that much is these command cards. Now I've already mentioned how these command cards can be part of your strategy, but they may also be part of your victory point condition, because as you play the game, you're going to lose access to your command cards. You can always get them back if you want, and you're going to be sacrificing something called a lot of victory points, because if you can manage to plan your strategy out from the beginning of the game all the way to the end and make sure you never pull back any of your command cards, you're looking at an additional 30 victory points. And that could be a great, at least almost 20% of your score right there. So again, future planning, knowing what you're doing versus the other players at the table can be really, really fast. Really fascinating and awesome when you play this game. Another thing I appreciate about this game is when it comes to usual worker placement games, one of the greatest strategies for any worker placement game, or dare I say any staple of any worker placement game, is the command myth that whomever has thine greatest worker pool limit shall winneth thine game, or something like that. I was trying to be funny here. But this is actually one of those games where having the most amount of workers is not a secret to winning the game. And actually it's pretty possible, and actually highly possible, to win the game without ever getting any more workers out there. I've actually scored and won sometimes by a great margin by not getting extra workers, but by focusing where I needed to focus. And again, just relying on good card play of the command cards. It's possible to do it. You just need to play smart and play well, and I really do appreciate it. There's also enough controlled chaos and variety in the game, because you have the different way the hordes come out, which may have different powers when they come out. You have different artifact cards, which are going to score the different end game victory conditions. You're going to use 3 of 5 that come in the basic game. You have asymmetric player powers thanks to the generals and the advisors you're going to build up. And your generals and your advisors, you'll always start with the same general every time you play the game. But as you play the game, you have the potential to purchase more advisors, adding more skills, adding more powers, more ways to get resources, more ways to interact with the board, and more ways to get more victory points. It's really, really cool. Of course, I really do appreciate, and I'm not going to lie here, the fact that you have double use cards. One of my favorite things from some of my most favorite games, I'll use the example of one of my favorite card games, Race for the Galaxy, which is a card game where the cards have double use. You can also look at 51st State, another game where the cards have multiple use. Well, in this case, the cards have multiple uses too. You can take these advisors for the power and add them onto your general, or you can flip them upside down to increase the power of your general, making your general more powerful. Again, all part of the strategies and all part of the tactics, which means that this is also a double-edged sword. You can do this as a denial tactic, because if you see one of these advisor cards on the advisor row and you can sit there and go, that card, if my opponent over there gets that card, is going to get some really awesome things, but it really doesn't help me that much. So if I buy it, that's kind of wasting my resources to do so. Not in this game. In this game, I can buy it because even on the backside, this card is going to help me. It's still going to be a good thing for me. Adding a little bit of that denial tactic. And denial is that spice that you need for any kind of worker placement game that adds just a little bit more to make those worker placement games just a little bit better. Another thing I also appreciate about the game, and I didn't like the concept of it when I saw it on the surface, but was the idea of these shame tokens. Now these shame tokens, what they do is they make it so that you can't be greedy for resources. And at first I was like going, worker placement games, the whole idea of a worker placement game is for me to send workers and get resources. But if I send my workers here to get these resources, and if I'm the only person to go there, then I'm going to get shame tokens. And these shame tokens are going to cost me victory points at the end of the game, so I can't get my resources. But we have more of a mind game, and more of a game that's kind of more like a, hey everybody, look at this wonderful thing there. There's that nice one open spot. First one there is going to get it, which means that turn order is really, really important here, which is something that has become less and less important in a lot of the worker placement games I've seen lately, where turn order is good, but it's not the be-all, end-all. And again, this game has not reached that level, but it has kind of elevated turn order just a little bit more, and we see how it's just a little bit more important in this game, because turn order can be so imperative to get your workers into that location, to make sure you get in on that gravy train to go ahead and get those resources before they're all taken away from you, or before you have to risk getting those shame tokens because you didn't get the resources to come out the way you wanted to, or you get the shame of just having the Mongol hordes attacking you and you didn't do your due diligence to keep the wall built, and these hordes crashed on through, causing shame to all of our players. And finally, we have the hallelujah moment, because we have a game that actually plays 5 players. I don't know why so many publishers and game designers insist on breaking all their games off of 4 players. I'm just concerned, or just pretty much convinced at this point, that they just don't want my money, because I don't buy 4-player games anymore. If your game taps out, or caps out at 4 players. It also caps out on not touching my gaming wallet because I'm not going to buy it. Games that go up to 5 players, I will buy every single time for the simple fact that that is my play group. I'm not going to cut my play group down just so you can sell your 4-player game, so I'm so darn thankful that this is a game that goes all the way up to 5 players. Awaken Realms, thank you so much for that extra inclusion. It was such an awesome thing, and I really do appreciate it. Now, I can't keep heaping praise on Awaken Realms and the Great Wall because there are problems, and one of the biggest problems is the big old 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is going to be the rulebook. This rulebook is badly in need of CPR. Now, it's not that the rulebook is the worst thing I've seen. I'm just going to say that it needs examples, it needs better organization, it needs clarifications, and okay, yeah, it needs a little bit of CPR. It's a pretty strong sign of how much of a struggle the rulebook is when there's a current FAQ that is now 6 pages long. Now, just to be fair, some of the questions in the FAQ are actually in the rulebook. Like some of the questions where people say, what is your max hand size, your tactic cards? FAQ says 5. It's actually in the rulebook. But there are sections of the rulebook that just are not spelling things out clearly, they are not done clearly, or they don't explain the turn structure very well. Now, of course, the great benefit about this is if you watch my channel, you have a wonderful tutorial video that you can check out. And I know it's a little bit long, but I'm a strong believer in that teaching somebody how to play the game right ensures that they're going to play the game and actually enjoy it versus teaching them wrong and having them get fed up with the game and putting it back on the shelf and not enjoying a great game. So the rulebook needs lots of help. Now there was another secondary Kickstarter or GamePound campaign where you can get an upgrade kit where they're saying they're going to send out a couple fixed cards and a corrected rulebook. I haven't seen this corrected rulebook, and I saw what the first rulebook looked like, and I remember when the original Kickstarter came out, people were saying, hey, post the rulebook, we'll give you some feedback and let you know if the rulebook is good or not. Didn't happen. So I don't know if I have any faith in the second rulebook being any better at all. Luckily at this point, I don't need the new rulebook because I know how to play the game. I know how to play it right. And if you check out my tutorial video, my playthrough video, you'll probably agree with me that I know how to play it right. But just understand this rulebook, it's in bad need of CPR. A little bit of life support because it just needs that FAQ to really understand how to play the game. And now we get to the me issues versus not really an issue that's quite with the game. And I know some of you are going to listen to some of these complaints and say, well, that sounds like your problem, nobody else's. It is my problem, and it's my review here, so I'm going to tell you some things I'm fed up with. One of the things I'm fed up with, the fact that it does feel like the meeple version of the game is an afterthought. My impression of the original Kickstarter when it came out is that the meeples was going to be the primary and then the plastic miniatures was going to be a secondary, a limited run. Well, it looks like that is not the case, and I do understand it turned out to be an issue of economies and stuff like that, but it does have me concerned with the future of the game. If there's any other future content that's going to come out there, I don't think they're going to do a meeple version, which means I'm going to have a Frankenstein-looking game. I get it. It's a me issue, but it's something I'm kind of concerned about this time. Granted, I do have lots of content for the game, but I am concerned that when the more content comes out there, I'm going to have meeples next to miniatures, and it's going to look really goofy. I'm actually so hesitant at this point that if there was a way for me just to get the plastic miniatures for this game, I'd probably figure out a way to make that happen because I'm afraid that these meeples are not going to carry on. Adding into the fact about how these meeples also kind of feels like a secondary concern at this point was the design for the game box. They actually purposely made a box that doesn't feel like it was designed to hold all the components in it. Matter of fact, if you look at the game box just for the meeple version, it's actually smaller than the version for the plastic miniatures, which you're like going, well, it makes more sense. Plastic miniatures are bigger, they need more room. Well, why design another box for another version of the game and make that box so much smaller that everything doesn't fit in the box? I mean, literally, it doesn't fit in the box. Check out these little screenshots and these images I have. The box does not close. Matter of fact, it's actually to the point now where if I am really thinking about it, I am actually thinking about with these great walls, doing away with these stands and just keeping these top sections in there only because there's no way to make it fit in the box without the box sticking up quite a bit. It's kind of frustrating, and it wouldn't be a big deal, but I'm just kind of concerned that some of the components might get damaged. Luckily, there's a good insert in there which keeps all the player pieces and all the components separated, and, well, let's just cover that part really quick. That part of the insert is really fantastic. It just is really terrible that you have all these components that I have to constantly assemble every time I play the game. Every time I want to play the game, we got to spend about 10 or 15 minutes taking all these little individual components, putting them all together, putting all the barricades together, and just because we have a box that's specifically designed too small, when all they really could have done is just take all the boxes they already built and designed, put this insert in there, put all these components in there, and guess what? It would have fit in the box. But that's enough of the me issues. Let's actually get back onto the gameplay here, because I'm going to start ranting here. And I never like to rant, especially when it's just me just ranting about personal issues. That is probably not going to affect a lot of people. But we do have another kind of a gameplay issue here, and that is going to be a combination between the advisors and the generals in this game. Some combinations between the advisors and the generals can be a little bit bonkers overpowered, especially compared to how the other players are out there. I am probably going to suggest in the future that when I play this game, I'm probably going to have a home rule here. Once everybody's learned the game very, very well, where we're going to deal out 3 generals and 3 advisors to every player. Because I've seen a couple games now where somebody just managed to get that perfect lucky combination of that general and that advisor, and they pretty much take off like a roadrunner right in the beginning of the game, and they really start racking up the victory points just because they got a little bit lucky. Now, I understand that there are tons of generals in this game. There are tons of advisors in this game. It's hard to balance that, and if anybody could have got that balance, well, they're probably just, it's impossible. There's no way to do it. So I can understand that that's something that's hard to do, but I think I'm almost at the point now where, now that everybody's starting to learn the game, and as long as we're playing a game where everybody knows the game, I'm dealing out 3 generals and 3 advisors at the start of the game. That way we can make sure everybody has a little bit more even playing field. For those rare instances that you get those super powerful combinations where everybody's going, well, it looks like Bob's going to be winning this game because he got the general and the advisor that allows him to shoot archery bows all across the board. And every time he shoots, he gets honor every time. So he's racking about 8 honor every command phase, and there's no way we're catching up to him. No way at all. It's unfortunate. So again, it's just something we're probably going to do. And that kind of leads into one more minor issue that there is with this game, and that's going to be the Dead of Winter issue. And I refer to that as the game The Dead of Winter, which is a game from Plaid Hat Games, where it is possible if somebody knows that they're doing terrible, they can kind of tank the game just a little bit. And the way you can tank the game is by controlling the flow, not playing efficiently, and just not helping out the group. Because in this game, like I said, it's semi-cooperative. The players kind of have to work towards getting out these great walls. And it's very possible just to sit back and don't help with that. Ignore the full cooperative aspect of the game and try to do your own little thing. Now, it doesn't ruin the game, but understand it does kind of create that environment that I kind of felt when I played Dead of Winter, where it felt like you kind of look at that person and say, you know, you're not playing with the theme of the game, and you're kind of making the game not work as well. And of course, the reply is always, it's in the rules, and you kind of say to them, well, you're right, it is in the rules. But it also feels like it doesn't kind of fit with the theme of the game. This game is supposed to be semi-cooperative, where all the players are part of the empire, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring the most honor to their clan. And the way they bring the most honor to the clan is by working together cooperatively in the open, but behind the scenes stabbing each other in the back. And that's kind of the theme of the game. And when the players don't work with that theme, it kind of makes it lose a little bit of the desire for there. And it is one little unfortunate thing. Now, the positive about this is that's a personality issue, not a gameplay issue. But just understand, if you do play those kind of personalities and you have that problem with Dead of Winter, there's a possibility that you might experience here with this game also. So it's just something to be prepared about. Now, as I alluded to earlier, the Great Wall is a game that does play for 1 to 5 players, and it does seem to play well at all those player counts. Now, every single one of those player counts does seem to have its little idiosyncrasies, and I'm not going to say that as a negative. It's just things that you want to be aware of when you're playing the game, and don't expect these things to happen. For example, if you decide to play the game with a 2-player game, you need to have a dummy AI that's thrown in the game. It's just something you need to do. If you play the game as a 3-player game, understand that shame is not going to be a major consideration. Matter of fact, you can play a 3-player game and probably not see a single shame token. It's not because you're playing the game bad. It just doesn't happen that often in a 3-player game. When you start getting the 4 or 5-player games, though, you're going to see lots of those shame tokens happen, and you're going to see how the game evolves and plays differently at those different player counts. Additionally, the game does play cooperatively and competitively, and I'm going to say it plays pretty darn well on both aspects. The game does have its own components for the cooperative game and its own components for the competitive game, making sure the game is balanced in those aspects. Now, I would love to give more opinions on the cooperative game, but at this point, I haven't played the game enough as a cooperative game to give an honest review of it, and I'm the kind of reviewer who doesn't like to talk about something unless I have enough experience. I think it does a disservice to the game, and I'm not saying that as a caveat, as a warning. I'm just saying I haven't played enough. I think it's good. I actually think it works out as a cooperative game, but I'd like to give it some more play to see if there's any little warts or any odd things that come out there. And if there's enough people who view this video, or I get enough requests for it, I can definitely do another full series looking at the cooperative aspects of the game, doing a tutorial video for those extra cooperative aspects. Just leave comments down below. I will take them all and I'll look at all of them. That's what people want. I can definitely make sure that happens. What's my bottom line here with the Great Wall board game? My bottom line here with the Great Wall board game is you have a great evolution of the worker placement game. You have a game that has a little bit of the prisoner's dilemma going on where you're not quite sure what the other player is doing. So you want to make sure what you're modifying, what you're doing to make sure you work towards that prisoner's dilemma. It's not a true prisoner's dilemma game, but the mechanic is definitely included in there. I also love the command cards. I love how it all works out, and I cannot say enough how great the components look in this game. The artwork is absolutely fantastic. It's very thematic. It's very good. All the quality of the components is extremely good. The card stock on these cards is absolutely dynamite. I mean, this is just a couple of cards. If I did this with a couple of cards in your average card game, these things would be bending back all the way back because I just have a couple of cards here. I'm just flipping back and forth. That is a thick inner card stock on these cards. That is some dynamite, wonderful production quality there. These, as much as I'm annoyed with having to assemble them all the time, these are thick cardboard too. The board is double-sided. There are some great, wonderful reminders as you're playing the game. As you're learning the rules, the game does have some built-in reminders to make sure that you remember some of the idiosyncrasies, the small minor rules, such as if you make a donation, it's going to give you 2 honor. You're going to get honor by going out here at these different locations. It makes you understand there's a difference between the green and the red. It makes you understand all these little things, these little price markers, all these little things such as arrows and little places for all the different cards. They did such a great job. You know that Awaken Realms did their homework here. They looked out there, they went out there and said, if we're going to make a complex game, we need to make a complex game that's going to work with the user. This game creates a wonderful user experience where the user feels like there's enough oomph, enough extra stuff in there to help you appreciate that they did the right thing. And of course, it's always nice that you get a nice player aid. Now, there was one thing I would like to add to this player aid, and that would have been something that had a nice turn structure on it. Luckily, there's something like that on the back of the rule book, so that does work out pretty darn nice. So it's not a big thing. Just keep the rule book handy, flip over to the back side. There's a nice turn overview structure, so it works out perfectly good. Bottom line here is, I think Awaken Realms did a great game. This is a fantastic 1 to 5 player worker placement game with a whole bunch of extra mechanics that just work together so great. I can highly recommend it. I'm glad it's part of my collection. This is a game that's going to get a lot of play. Even with the basic game right here, I actually right now at this point, I'm enjoying just playing the basic game just with the stretch goal. Yeah, the expansions add some more complexity and some new cool things, but the basic game is just so great, so fantastic, and so darn enjoyable. Hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have enjoyed this video series. If you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them in the YouTube comments down below. I'll do my best to get them answered as quickly as I can. Also, feel free to email me at off-the-shelf board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. I'll do my best to answer your questions as quickly as I can. Enjoy the content. Enjoy the videos I put out there. Think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. otsbgr at the end of the Patreon tag, so just patreon.com/otsbgr. It's a great way to show your thanks and say that you enjoy the content I put out there. Just tossing $1 in the tip jar is a great way. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed this video series. Click that like button, click that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching.